fascist dystopia where every transaction you ever made tells something about your habits, your politics, your associations, your movement, your physical location. On the one hand, all of this data gets collected and shared among all of the intelligence agencies and corporations, or leaked. And on the other hand, if the people in power choose to, they can decide to debank you overnight. They turn off the switch. Now imagine what happens if your bank account is shut down and cash doesn't exist. Well, you can't eat. You can't buy food. Done. You can't use transportation. You can't rent an apartment. They can literally destroy your life in a second. And if you think this is crazy, this is happening today in China. They have a system called Sesame. It's called a social credit score. And they use your social media postings to give everyone a score as to how well they toe the line of political correctness to the doctrine of the Communist Party. People who have a negative credit score on that system are denied access to public transportation. They're denied access to airlines, they're denied access to trains, they're denied access to jobs in the government, they're denied access to apartments to rent. They're doing that today. Now, today, those people have cash to go back on. What happens when there's no cash? If the only people who are allowed to be intermediaries are the large corporations, they will commit the crime. It's like if you want to rob a bank nowadays, the best way to do so is to have a banking license. Then you can rob the entire bank and/or country with complete immunity or impunity. If you rob one person and steal 20 pounds from them, you're going to jail. If you rob 2 million people of their homes and mortgages, right, you're not going to jail. You're getting a 10 million bonus from the bank, and you're retiring in peace and quiet in the countryside. There are two ways to express power in this world, voice and exit. When voice is no longer sufficient, and sometimes even when it is, exit is a more powerful expression. And exit means get your money out of the system, get yourself out of the system, and reduce your exposure to the ridiculous system as much as you can. Bitcoin is a means to switch from expressing power through voice to exit. This is one of the things that can compete with banks. And banks really need competition, right? They're way too comfortable with their power and established systems. As I've said many, many times, the election choices facing Americans were a choice between blue Goldman Sachs and red Goldman Sachs. You can choose the color, but Goldman Sachs is still going to be in charge, and if you think your vote is going to make a difference, you're a fool. But in a broader sense, we live in a world that is very fragmented, where money faces borders, very hard borders, strict lines of demarcation between countries and currencies. And you have these national currencies that are badly managed by governments and banks in countries where there is very little difference between a government, a bank, and an organized crime syndicate. All three are the same. The governments are organized crime syndicates. And so what happens when they have a crisis is they take the entire population hostage with them. They shut down the borders. They create currency controls. You can't withdraw money from the ATMs. You can't exchange money for another currency. You go with the ship and sink down with it. Bitcoin is one of those things that actually offers a safe haven in that particular situation. But it also allows people who have never had a bank account to connect to a global financial system. And Bitcoin bypasses all of that. It gives everybody a currency that is open and global. That creates some very interesting conditions in the world. It allows us to create a kind of unified financial system that exists outside of the mandates of government, that is completely private and is very empowering for individuals.
And it scares the hell out of governments and banks.
It scares the hell out of governments to have people in control of their own money, at which point you should really ask yourself, what kind of government is that doesn't believe in freedom of association, freedom of expression, freedom of commerce? That's more of an indictment of that kind of government than it is of Bitcoin. If your government is afraid of Bitcoin, you should ask yourself, what kind of government do I have? Creating a currency that does not belong to a nation seems weird at first. But then again, you know, we used to have airlines that only existed for one nation and had the flag on the tail, right? Flag carriers, they called them. And phone companies that were monopolies in one nation and had the flag on them. And now that seems absurd. And I think within 20 years, the idea of national currencies as the only option will seem absurd. So Bitcoin is a currency that exists on the internet, that is created on the internet, that really serves the needs of the internet generation. It does not belong to any government. It's not controlled by any bank. Bitcoin isn't a company or product or a service. It's an internet protocol. It's a method of communication, just like we say the web or email, and that doesn't belong to anyone. It's a shared common public good on the internet. Bitcoin is a digital currency and payment system that is a shared good, and it is controlled collectively by the participants in the network.
Bitcoin's probably going to go to $50,000. Gold's going to go to $15,000, and silver will probably go to $200. And you're going to buy it then? It's coming soon. Be patient. Bitcoin boom beating gold and silver. What does that mean? It means you better buy as much as you can now. The train is moving, the dollar is dying, silver is still affordable for everyone. And as the dollar crashes, what counts is not price, but how many coins of gold, silver, or Bitcoin do you own?
Also, the question is, what do you jump into when you jump off the train? And the issue is, you can't jump into cash. Cash is trash because they're going to print money. What do? You get out.
So I don't save dollars because I don't trust the US dollar. And I just save gold and silver and recently Bitcoin. You know, they printed more money in 2020 than they did in the first 200 years of our country. And still people are saving dollars.
Statistically speaking, national currencies have a shelf life of about 30 years before they collapse in value because no government can resist the temptation of financing profligacy through printing. And so they print and print and print, and they devalue the currency and inflate it to nothing. And they keep printing, and eventually you have this sudden collapse in confidence, and the currency spikes, the inflation spikes, and the value just drops.
But the average person has been conditioned to think about paper, fake money, fake dollars. And at the same time, they're printing as much money as they possibly can. They give it to their rich friends. They don't give it to us. And then they print it, and interest rates keep going down.
They need to pay off their debt. And in order to do that, the best way to do that is to inflate the currency so that the debt shrinks in terms of its real value, because the currency is worth less, which is a way of stealing from savers. So essentially, you're attacking the savings of pensioners and other savers in the economy in a shadow tax through inflation to transfer money to the government. The government doesn't have savings, it has debt, so it doesn't care if the currency is worthless. Savers lose the value of their savings. Now, in order for this to work, you have to make your own currency worthless, and this is what the governments are trying to do.
I am always startled at how few people are aware of what's happening. The United States is the largest debtor nation in the world by many factors, and we keep adding staggering amounts of money to our debt. This has always ended badly. I mean, this is going to end very, very badly when it ends.
It's coming soon. We're going to have negative interest rates. I don't know how they can do that, but if you deposit $100 in the bank, when I was a kid, I got 15% interest. So I put $100 in the bank, and a year later, I got $115. Today, you put $100 in the bank, and you got to pay the bank $15. And they're printing it. So the value of the dollar is going down, but the price of keeping it in the bank keeps going up. They charge you to keep your money in the bank. Why would you save money?
Inflation is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. It is purely a mode of taxation. And so I think when you start looking at central banking as less of an economic story and more of a crime story, you're starting to get the picture.
If you trust the U.S. government or the central banks, the Fed, and Wall Street, then save money. But if you don't, then buy gold, silver, and Bitcoin.
It allows us to create a kind of unified financial system that exists outside of the mandates of government, that is completely private and is very empowering for individuals.
The reason I like gold, silver, and Bitcoin, it's outside the system. It's out of reach of the U.S. government and the U.S. Treasury and things like this. So I love this stuff. I just simply do not trust my government.
It's an apparatus for theft. It's designed to siphon value off of society until it collapses. And we've seen it happen time and time again. Like the inflation rate is inversely proportionate to social well-being. And you see that with any hyperinflating currency. What happens to social cooperation in Venezuela, right? You have cash in the streets. No one can trust anyone. No one can buy bread. How do you conduct your life? So Bitcoin just flips that whole thing on its head. It says we're taking inflation to absolute zero, which in theory would mean a society running on a Bitcoin standard could benefit in nearly infinite ways.
Creating a currency that does not belong to a nation seems weird at first. Within 20 years, the idea of national currencies as the only option will seem absurd.
You know, now that the elections are over and all this, I don't care if it's Trump or Biden, they're going to have to print so much money just to pay for all of the social entitlement programs so people don't riot. They can't afford to have any more rioting. So they're going to print more and more money, and people are still saving dollars or yen or euro or pesos. Right now, you should be saving gold, silver, or Bitcoin.
Every 4 years, the inflation rate of Bitcoin, which is the amount of Bitcoin produced per block, which is its ledger, it gets cut in half. So it's subject actually to exponential decay. So just for easy numbers, this year we're producing about 329,000 Bitcoin per year. By the year 2100, that number per year has contracted to 0.31 Bitcoin per year. So we're talking about a drop of 6 orders of magnitude in 80 years. So again, there's this quote that the greatest shortcoming of mankind is his inability to understand the exponential function. So Bitcoin has an inflation rate subject to exponential decay, and that's why it's really hard for people to get their head around the implications of it. Gold has almost a $10 trillion market cap today. That figure, it tends to be suppressed though, because again, central banks own about 20% of the gold supply. So say gold has around a $10 trillion market cap, and Bitcoin again is superior across all properties of money to gold. So I think the first bar for Bitcoin to hit is just an equal market cap to gold. And so it hits that $10 trillion mark, you're looking at around $400,000 to $450,000 per Bitcoin. If you look at global money supply, which this number, there's different perspectives on this number, but global M2 is around 100 trillion, somewhere between 80 and 100 trillion dollars. If Bitcoin did ultimately become this singular global asset or global reserve of money, it would be valued at around $5 million per coin. It is microscopic right now compared for what it is. And I think what we're seeing is just the market trying to digest this, once in a 500-year type invention. It's it's almost, that's why I equated it to the number 0. It's like, it's hard to even understand or imagine the implications of an innovation this big. We've never had an absolutely scarce money that is almost completely resistant to theft and confiscation. It's a network that can't be shut down by regulation. So it's like it's imposing these capitalist monetary principles on the world. And I think, as we know, as we generate more wealth through trade. So if we can have a world that's less regulated and more heavily traded, it creates more wealth for all. So I think Bitcoin is this gateway to a new type of society.